Your daughter isn't important enough to be invited. We only want successful people in Gavin's circle. That's what my mother said, not to me, to my 8-year-old daughter, at a public park. On a Saturday afternoon in Memphis, while Lily was sitting on a bench with her sketchbook, drawing the ducks on the pond. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply placed my hand on Lily's shoulder, looked Patricia Pemberton directly in the eyes and said, "I understand exactly where we stand, Patricia. Thank you for making it clear." Then I took my daughter's hand and we walked to the car. Lily didn't say anything for the first 3 blocks. She just held her sketchbook against her chest with both arms, pressing it flat like a shield. Then, in a voice so small it cracked right down the middle, she said, "Mom, what did I do wrong?" I kept my eyes on the road, my hands steady at 10 and 2, my voice even. "Nothing, baby. You didn't do a single thing wrong." "Then why doesn't Grandma want me there?" I didn't have an answer that would make sense to an 8-year-old, because the truth was ugly and complicated and stretched back almost a decade, so I said the only honest thing I could. "Some people don't know how to love the right way, Lily. That's not your fault. That will never be your fault." She nodded slowly, the way she does when she's processing something too big for her age. Then she opened her sketchbook again and started drawing. Not the ducks this time, just circles. Over and over. Small, tight circles pressed so hard the pencil nearly tore through the page. I watched her in the rearview mirror and felt something shift inside my chest. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a clean, quiet break. Like a wire pulled taut for years finally snapping free. If you've ever had a family member treat you like you didn't matter, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me take you back. Because this didn't start at that park. It started 8 years ago, when I was 27 years old and made the mistake of believing I had the right to say no. I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment in East Memphis, working as a nursing assistant and saving every dollar I could toward my registered nursing degree. I had $22,000 in a savings account. Not a trust fund, not a gift. $22,000 I had earned across 4 years of double shifts, missed holidays, and meals that came out of the hospital cafeteria because I couldn't afford to eat anywhere else. My brother Gavin was 24. He had just come to my parents with his grand plan, a cocktail bar in Midtown. He had a name picked out, a logo designed, and absolutely no business plan. What he did have was confidence, a smile that made our mother melt, and a lifetime of never hearing the word no. My parents had already given him $85,000 for his first venture, a boutique sneaker resale shop that lasted 11 months. Before that, they'd covered $52,000 in tuition for a communications degree he used exactly never. And now Gavin needed another $40,000 to get the cocktail bar off the ground. Patricia called me on a Tuesday evening. I remember because I had just finished a 12-hour shift and my feet were still swollen in my shoes. "Elise, your brother needs help with the bar. Your father and I have given what we can. We need you to contribute your part." My part. Like I was a shareholder in Gavin's failures. "How much?" I asked. $22,000 should cover the gap. Not some of it. Not whatever I could spare. All of it. Every cent I had saved for nursing school. I stayed quiet for a moment. Then I said, "No." One word. No explanation, no negotiation. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then Patricia said, "Excuse me?" I said no. "That money is for my nursing program. I've been saving for 4 years. Your brother is trying to build something, Elise. This is family. Family helps family. I've helped. I helped him move into his apartment. I helped him with his resume twice. But I'm not giving him my school savings for a bar he hasn't even written a business plan for." That's when her voice changed. It went from that clipped, authoritative tone to something lower, colder. The voice she used when she wanted you to understand that you had crossed a line you could never uncross. "If you won't help your brother, you aren't part of this family." I heard my father in the background. He cleared his throat. That was it. That was his entire contribution. One throat clear and then silence. His silence wasn't gentle. It was permission. "I understand," I said. "Do you?" "Because I want to be very clear, Elise. If you choose your little savings account over your own flesh and blood, don't expect to be welcome at Thanksgiving. Don't expect birthday calls. Don't expect anything." "I understand," I said again. And I did. For the first time in 27 years, I understood perfectly. Patricia hung up without saying goodbye. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, still in my scrubs, still in my swollen shoes. I didn't cry. I just sat there and felt the shape of the silence she had left behind. That was the last time I spoke to my mother for 8 years. Gavin got his bar. My parents found the $22,000 somewhere else, probably a home equity line. The bar lasted 14 months before it closed. Then came Gavin's second venture, a creative consulting agency that burned through another $60,000 of my parents' retirement savings over 2 years. That one didn't even make it a full year before the website went dark and the phone number was disconnected. And through all of it, I was erased. No calls on my birthday, no invitation to Christmas. When Lily was born, I sent a photo to my parents' address. It came back unopened. Return to sender. Patricia had written it in her own handwriting on the envelope. I stopped trying after that, but I didn't stop working. The nursing program fell apart when my schedule couldn't accommodate a newborn and full-time clinical rotations, so I pivoted. I took a property management certification course online while Lily napped. I got licensed in Tennessee. I started managing units for other investors, collecting $1,200 a month in management fees while learning every clause of every lease I touched. By the time Lily was 3, I had saved enough for a down payment on my first commercial property. A small retail unit near the University of Memphis, 1,200 square feet, purchased through a generic LLCI registered as Pemberton Holdings. The name meant nothing to anyone. Pemberton is common enough in the South. No one connected it to me because no one was looking. I kept my head down. I lived in the same modest 2-bedroom rental. I drove a 9-year-old Honda. I bought Lily's clothes at consignment shops and packed her lunch every single day, and every month, the rental income from that first unit went straight into the next acquisition. By the time Lily was 5, I owned 3 properties. By the time she was 7, I owned 5. And by the time she turned 8, 6 months before that day at the park, I held $2.4 million in commercial equity across 6 Memphis properties, all managed through Marcus Miller, my attorney and property manager, all under the Pemberton Holdings, LLC. All invisible. Marcus handled everything. Lease negotiations, tenant communications, maintenance contracts. My name appeared on exactly one document. The LLC registration filed with the Tennessee Secretary of State. And unless you knew to look for it, unless you pulled the corporate records and cross-referenced the registered agent, you would never know that the quiet single mother in the 2-bedroom rental owned half a block of commercial real estate. That was the point. I didn't build it to impress anyone. I built it to make sure no one could ever take anything from me again. 6 months before the park. That's when it started. Marcus called me on a Wednesday morning, the way he always did, with his monthly portfolio update. 5 of 6 units performing on schedule, occupancy at full capacity, net operating income ahead of projections by 11%. Then he paused. There's a new tenant in Unit 4, he said. The 3,000 square foot space on Poplar. Signed a 36-month commercial lease at $4,500 monthly. Co-working concept called Gavin's Hub. I felt the air leave my lungs. Not fast. Slow, like a tire with a nail in it. Gavin, I said. Gavin Pemberton, yes. He didn't qualify on his own financials. Credit score was 511. Insufficient revenue history, no collateral. So how did the lease get signed? 2 personal guarantors, Patricia Pemberton and Richard Pemberton. They co-signed the lease as joint and several guarantors. Their house is listed as collateral backing. My parents. Co-signing a lease on a building they didn't know I owned. For a business they didn't know was already doomed. I closed my eyes. Marcus, did they ask who owns the LLC? No. The lease was executed through standard channels. They dealt with my office. My name is on the correspondence as managing agent. No one inquired about the ownership entity beyond the LLC name on the lease. I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. Gavin was renting my building. My parents had staked their house on it, and none of them had any idea. I didn't do anything. I didn't call. I didn't intervene. I told Marcus to manage the lease like any other tenant. Standard terms, standard enforcement. If Gavin paid his rent and followed the lease, he would be treated the same as every other business in my portfolio. He didn't. The first month's rent came in 4 days late. Marcus noted it, waived the late fee as a courtesy per our standard first offense policy, and sent a reminder about payment terms. The second month was 9 days late. Marcus applied the contractual late fee of $225 and sent a formal written notice. The third month didn't come at all. Marcus called me at exactly 8:12 a.m. on a Tuesday. Unit 4 is 60 days delinquent, $9,000 in unpaid rent. Additionally, during the scheduled quarterly inspection, I documented $10,000 in unauthorized structural modifications. He removed a load-bearing partition wall and installed unapproved electrical for a server rack. None of it was permitted. None of it was authorized under the lease terms. I sat at my kitchen table. Lily was eating cereal across from me, humming something from a cartoon, her feet swinging because they didn't reach the floor. Total exposure? I asked. $23,500. 3 months of rent, including the current month, plus the estimated cost of restoring the unauthorized modifications. And the lease is clear. Any structural modification without written landlord consent constitutes a material breach. That alone is grounds for eviction independent of the non-payment. And the guarantors? Patricia and Richard Pemberton are jointly and severally liable for all amounts owed under the personal guarantee. If Gavin defaults, the obligation transfers to them in full. I looked at Lily. She was drawing on a napkin now. A house with a big sun and 2 stick figures in the yard. Just the 2 of us. The way it had always been. Send me the full report, I said. Every inspection photo, every late notice, every communication. I want it all documented. Already compiled. I'll have it in your inbox within the hour. I hung up the phone. Lily looked up from her napkin. Who was that, Mom? Just work, sweetheart. She nodded and went back to drawing. I watched her for a long moment, her small hand moving carefully across the napkin, pressing just hard enough to make the colors bright. She had no idea that the building her uncle was destroying was mine. She had no idea that the grandparents who refused to open her baby photo had just bet their house on the son they chose. And she had no idea that 3 weeks later, her grandmother would look her in the face at a public park and tell her she wasn't important enough. That was the moment that changed everything, because I could absorb the cruelty when it was aimed at me. I had been doing it my whole life. I had swallowed the silence. I had swallowed the return to sender envelope. I had swallowed 8 years of birthdays with no phone call and holidays with no invitation. But Lily, my daughter, 8 years old, sitting on a park bench with her sketchbook, drawing ducks. She didn't deserve a single second of it. And I was done pretending that my silence was protecting her. My silence wasn't a shield. It was an open door. And the people walking through it had just aimed their cruelty at the only person in my life who mattered. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and Marcus's report spread across the screen. The house was dark except for the glow of the monitor. The streetlight cut through the blinds in thin white lines across the floor. I read every page, every inspection photograph, every unanswered late notice, every dollar Gavin owed, and every clause he had violated. Then I opened my email and stared at the blank compose window for a long time. The cursor blinked. The house was silent. And something inside me settled. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. Sharp and clean, like a blade pulled from a drawer. I began to type. The email was short. 1 line. Marcus, proceed with the eviction filing and trigger the personal guarantee clause. No exceptions. I read it once. Read it twice. Then I pressed send. The soft, unmistakable click of confirmation echoed in the dead silence of the kitchen. The screen dimmed. I closed the laptop slowly, deliberately, and sat in the dark for a long time. The streetlight still cut through the blinds. The house still held its silence. Lily was still asleep down the hall, her door cracked open the way she liked it, the glow of her nightlight casting a thin yellow line across the carpet. I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, nothing. Just the quiet hum of a decision that had already been made the moment Patricia looked at my daughter and told her she wasn't enough. I went to bed. I slept through the night for the first time in weeks. Marcus filed the eviction notice the next morning at exactly 9:15 a.m. Under Tennessee commercial eviction law, the process was clean. A 14-day written notice to cure or vacate, delivered by certified mails and posted on the premises. The notice listed the full amount owed, $13,500 in unpaid rent, covering 3 months at $4,500 plus $10,000 in unauthorized structural damages documented during the quarterly inspection. Total, $23,500. The personal guarantee clause was cited on page 2, with Patricia and Richard Pemberton named as jointly and severally liable co-signers. Marcus handled everything. I didn't call Gavin. I didn't call my parents. I didn't send a text or write a letter or drive past the building. I didn't need to. The lease was the lease. The terms were the terms, and Gavin had broken both in ways that were documented, time-stamped, and photographed. 3 days after the notice was posted, my phone started buzzing. Not from Gavin, from Patricia. The first call came at 7:43 a.m. I watched the screen light up on the nightstand. Her name. The same name I hadn't seen on my phone in 8 years. I let it ring until it stopped. She called again at 7:51, then 8:04, then 8:17. By noon, there were 11 missed calls. No voicemails. Patricia never left voicemails. She expected you to see her name and call back immediately, the way you were supposed to, the way obedient daughters did. I didn't call back. By the end of the first week, there were 26 missed calls from Patricia's number and 16 from a number I didn't recognize, which I later learned was Richard's new cell phone. The man who hadn't spoken a full sentence to me in 8 years suddenly had something to say. I turned off the ringer. By the end of the second week, the calls had climbed to 42. Patricia? Richard? A number that was probably Gavin's, though I didn't bother confirming. I deleted the notifications without reading them. I didn't listen to any messages. I didn't open any texts. Marcus gave me updates when I asked for them, which was once a week on Wednesday mornings, during our standard portfolio call. Gavin has not cured the default, he told me on the first Wednesday. No payment has been made, no communication from the tenant or the guarantors to my office. The 14-day notice expires Friday. And then? Then I file the detainer warrant with the Shelby County General Sessions Court. Hearing will be set within 10 business days. Do it. The second Wednesday, Marcus confirmed the court date. Hearing is set for next Thursday at 10 a.m. The filing names Pemberton Holdings, LLC as plaintiff, and Gavin Pemberton as defendant. Patricia and Richard Pemberton are named as co-respondents under the personal guarantee. Will they know who owns the LLC before the hearing? Not necessarily. The LLC is the named plaintiff. My name appears as managing agent and attorney of record. However, if the court requires a disclosure of beneficial ownership, or if opposing counsel requests it, the ownership records become part of the proceeding. Tennessee law is clear on that. Let it play out, I said. Standard process. Nothing special. Nothing personal. Understood. I hung up. Lily was at the kitchen table doing her math homework. She looked up at me. Work again? Work again? I said. She smiled. A real one. The kind she had started giving more freely since I stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed, since the circles in her sketchbook had slowly become flowers again. 3 weeks passed from the night I sent that email to the morning of the hearing. In those 3 weeks, I didn't speak to a single member of my family, not one word. I went to work. I picked Lily up from school. I made dinner. I read her stories before bed. I managed my properties through Marcus the same way I always had, with spreadsheets and inspection reports and lease amendments reviewed on my laptop after 9 p.m. The world didn't crack open. The sky didn't fall. Nothing collapsed except the silence I had mistaken for peace. On Thursday morning, I dropped Lily off at school, kissed her forehead, and drove downtown to the Shelby County Courthouse. I parked 3 blocks away. I wore a gray blazer, black slacks, and flat shoes. No jewelry, no statement. I walked through security, passed through the metal detector, and took a seat in the back row of courtroom 4. The room was half full. Standard commercial docket, small claims, lease disputes, property conflicts. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The benches were hardwood. The air smelled like floor polish and old paper. I sat with my hands folded in my lap and waited. At 10:07 a.m., the case was called. Pemberton Holdings, LLC versus Gavin Pemberton, Patricia Pemberton, and Richard Pemberton. Marcus stood from the plaintiff's table. He was wearing a navy suit, white shirt, no tie. Professional, calm. He had a manila folder in front of him containing every document I had reviewed at my kitchen table. Every photograph, every late notice, every line of the lease Gavin had signed and broken. Gavin was seated at the respondent's table. He was wearing a wrinkled dress shirt with the top button undone. No attorney beside him. He had come alone. He looked like he hadn't slept, his eyes red-rimmed, his leg bouncing under the table. Then I saw them. Third row, left side. Patricia in a cream-colored blouse, sitting rigid, her purse clutched in her lap. Richard beside her, shoulders rounded, staring at the floor. His hands were folded the same way they had always been folded at every dinner table where he chose not to speak. They hadn't seen me. I was behind them and to the right, partially obscured by a man in a denim jacket reading a newspaper. Marcus presented the case. He spoke evenly. He laid out the lease terms, the $4,500 monthly rent, the 3 months of non-payment totaling $13,500, the unauthorized removal of a load-bearing partition wall, the unpermitted electrical installation, the $10,000 in documented damages, the total judgment sought, $23,500. He submitted the inspection photographs, the certified mail receipts, the 14-day cure notice signed as received but unanswered, the personal guarantee agreement bearing Patricia and Richard Pemberton's signatures on page 4. Gavin didn't have an attorney. He spoke for himself, stumbling over words, saying something about cash flow problems and needing more time. He said the modifications were necessary for the business. He said he didn't realize he needed permission. The judge asked if the respondents wished to contest the documented evidence. Gavin looked at Patricia. Patricia was staring at the manila folder on Marcus's table. Her lips were pressed into a thin line. Then Marcus said the words that changed the air in the room. Your Honor, for the record, and pursuant to the court's disclosure requirements for LLC held properties, I submit the ownership registration for Pemberton Holdings, LLC. He placed a single sheet of paper on the bench. The sole member and beneficial owner of Pemberton Holdings, LLC is Elise Pemberton. The room didn't react. It was a courtroom full of strangers. The name meant nothing to them. But in the third row, Patricia's head turned like it was pulled on a wire. She scanned the room. Her eyes swept past the denim jacket, past the empty seats, and landed directly on me. I didn't move. I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, the same way I had sat on the edge of my bed 8 years ago in swollen shoes, listening to her tell me I wasn't family anymore. Patricia's face went white. Not red. White. Like every drop of blood had been pulled from the surface. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out for 3 full seconds. Then she stood up. The judge hadn't addressed her. No one had given her permission to speak, but Patricia Pemberton had never waited for permission in her life. Elise, what are you doing here? Tell this man to stop. We're family. Her voice cracked on the last word. It echoed against the courtroom walls and fell flat on the linoleum floor. I kept my voice steady, low enough that the people in the front row had to lean slightly to hear. I'm not your daughter today, Patricia. I'm your landlord, and the rent is due in full. Richard didn't look up. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor. His hands stayed folded. His silence wasn't gentle. It was the same silence it had always been. Permission. Permission for whatever came next, as long as he didn't have to be the one to say it. Gavin turned in his chair. He looked at me like I was a stranger, like the sister he hadn't spoken to in 8 years had materialized from somewhere that didn't exist in his understanding of the world. A world where I was supposed to be broke, where I was supposed to have failed, where I was supposed to be the cautionary tale his parents told at dinner to remind everyone what happens when you choose yourself over family. The judge called for order. Patricia sat down. Her hands were trembling in her lap. The hearing concluded in under 12 minutes. The judge granted the eviction order and entered a judgment of $23,500 against Gavin Pemberton, with Patricia and Richard Pemberton liable as personal guarantors. Marcus collected his documents. He closed the folder. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. I stood up from the back bench. I walked past the third row. Patricia reached out and grabbed my sleeve. Her fingers were cold. Her grip was weak. Elise, please, you don't understand. We put the house up. If we can't pay this, we could lose the house. Please, he's your brother. I stopped. I didn't pull my arm away. I looked at her hand on my sleeve and then at her face. Her mascara was already smudged at the corners. Her lower lip was quivering the way Lily's had at the park, except Lily was 8 years old and had done nothing wrong, and Patricia was 62 and had done everything wrong. You put your house up for a man who has failed at every business you funded, I said. You co-signed a lease without reading the ownership disclosure. You gambled your home on Gavin the same way you gambled your family, and when you had the chance to be a grandmother to my daughter, you looked an 8-year-old girl in the eye and told her she wasn't important enough. I let each sentence land. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't speed up. The judgment is $23,500. Your attorney can contact Marcus Miller to arrange a payment schedule. I gently removed her hand from my sleeve. She didn't resist. Her fingers slid away like they had no strength left in them. I walked through the courtroom doors, down the hallway, through security, and out into the Memphis morning. The sun was bright. The air was warm. The parking meter on the corner ticked softly in the breeze. I got into my car. I placed both hands on the steering wheel. I sat there for a full minute without starting the engine. Then I pulled out my phone. I went through my contacts. I blocked Patricia's number. I blocked Richard's number. I blocked the number I suspected was Gavin's. I removed myself from every old thread, every archived text chain, every last digital thread connecting me to the family that had cut me loose at 27 for choosing my own future. I didn't do it in anger. I did it in clarity. The phone went dark. The screen reflected my own face back at me, steady and still. I started the engine. It turned over with a low, steady hum. I pulled away from the curb, merged into traffic, and drove toward Lily's school. I didn't look back. The weeks that followed were the quietest of my life. Not empty quiet. Not the kind I had grown up with, where silence meant someone was deciding how to punish you. This was different. This was the sound of a house where no one was waiting for a phone call that would ruin the evening. No one was bracing for a knock at the door. No one was swallowing words to keep the peace. Lily noticed it before I did. She started leaving her bedroom door open at night instead of cracked. She started humming while she did her homework. She stopped drawing circles and started drawing trees, houses, birds with enormous wings that took up the whole page. One evening, about a week after the hearing, she looked up from the kitchen table and said, "Mom, the house feels bigger." It wasn't bigger. It was just ours. I kept my phone on silent for 3 days after the courthouse. Then I turned the ringer back on and realized it didn't matter. There were no calls, no texts, no voicemails piling up like threats disguised as concern. The numbers were blocked. The threads were deleted. The digital line between me and the Pemberton family had been severed with the same clean precision as the eviction order itself. Marcus called on Wednesday, the way he always did. "Eviction was executed yesterday," he said. "Sheriff's office supervised the lockout at 9 a.m. Gavin was not present. The space has been secured. I've arranged for a licensed contractor to assess the structural damage and begin restoration. Preliminary estimate is $8,200 for the wall repair and electrical remediation." And the judgment? Filed and recorded with the Shelby County Clerk. Patricia and Richard Pemberton have 30 days to satisfy the $23,500 or face further enforcement action. I've sent formal correspondence to their home address outlining the payment terms. Any response? Not yet. I thanked him. I hung up. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table while Lily finished a drawing of a woman standing next to a small girl in a field of sunflowers. She had written "us" at the bottom in purple crayon. I put it on the refrigerator that night. It's still there. Information didn't come to me because I went looking for it. It came the way things always do in Memphis, through industry contacts, courthouse records, and the quiet conversations that happen when property managers and commercial agents share a city long enough to know each other's business. The first thing I learned was about Gavin's hub. The equipment inside the space, The standing desks, the monitor arrays, the coffee bar setup, the server rack he had wired without a permit, all of it was seized 2 weeks after the lockout. Gavin had financed most of it through a small business equipment loan. When the co-working space closed and the lease was terminated, the lender triggered the acceleration clause. The full outstanding balance, $31,000, became due immediately. Gavin couldn't pay. The lender repossessed everything that wasn't bolted to the floor, and most of what was. Marcus told me the space was empty within 10 days. Clean concrete, bare walls. The only evidence Gavin's hub had ever existed was a faded vinyl decal on the front window that the contractor peeled off in one long strip. 3 months after the hearing, I learned through a mutual acquaintance in commercial lending that Patricia and Richard had taken out a second mortgage on their house to cover the $23,500 judgment. Their home, a 4-bedroom colonial in Germantown they had owned for 31 years, was now carrying 2 liens. The second mortgage was at 9.2% interest, the kind of rate you get when your co-signed tenant has a judgment on record and your combined credit has taken the hit. They paid the judgment in full. Marcus confirmed it on a Wednesday call, the same way he confirmed everything, calmly, without commentary. The $23,500 has been received and recorded. The matter is closed. Closed. One word. I let it settle. 4 months after the hearing, I heard Gavin had moved back into his parents' house, not the guest room, the basement. The same basement where Patricia used to store holiday decorations and Richard kept his fishing equipment. He was 32 years old, living in his parents' basement with no business, no income, no lease, and a credit score that had dropped to 478 after the judgment and the equipment loan default. He started driving for a rideshare company. Nights, mostly. Someone I knew through the Memphis Property Association mentioned seeing him behind the wheel of his parents' 10-year-old Buick at 2 a.m. outside a downtown hotel. He didn't say anything. He just pulled up to the curb and waited for the passenger to get in. Patricia and Richard sold the second car, a 3-year-old SUV, within 2 months of taking the second mortgage. The insurance, the payment, the gas. It was all excess weight on a household income that now had to service 2 mortgages on a retired teacher's pension and Richard's Social Security. Marcus told me, during a routine call about a different property, that he had heard through a title company contact that the Pembertons were exploring the possibility of selling the Germantown house entirely. Downsizing. Moving into something smaller. A 2-bedroom apartment closer to Midtown, the kind with shared laundry in the basement and assigned parking. I didn't ask for more details. I didn't need them. 6 months after the hearing, the commercial unit on Poplar, the same 3,000 square foot space that Gavin had rented and ruined, was fully restored. The contractor replaced the partition wall, rewired the electrical to code, repainted and polished the concrete floors. Marcus listed it at $5,200 monthly, $700 more than Gavin's original lease, reflecting the improved condition and the current market rate. It leased within 6 weeks to a medical supply distribution company. Clean tenants, strong financials. 5-year lease with annual escalation. They moved in on a Monday morning without ceremony. The vinyl decal was gone. The space was clean. The rent hit my account on the 1st of the month. Exactly as contracted. 8 months after the hearing, I heard from a property attorney I sometimes consulted with that Patricia had started working part-time at a church thrift shop in Cordova. Not volunteering, working. Sorting donated clothes and pricing housewares for $11.50 an hour. She was 62 years old, and for the first time in her life, she was standing behind a register making change for strangers. Richard, I was told, had taken on occasional handyman work through a neighbor's referral. Small jobs, leaky faucets, fence repairs. He was 65, with a bad left knee and hands that shook when he gripped a wrench too long. Someone said he didn't talk much on the jobs. Just showed up, did the work, and left. I didn't feel triumph when I heard those things. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt the way you feel when you watch a house that was already leaning finally settle into the ground. Not surprised. Not glad. Just aware that the structure was never sound to begin with, and the people inside had been pretending the cracks weren't there long before I stopped holding up the wall. 10 months after the hearing, on a Saturday afternoon in late October, I took Lily to the same park where Patricia had told her she wasn't important enough. It wasn't intentional. It was just the closest park with a pond, and Lily wanted to draw the ducks again. She had been asking for weeks, so we went. The bench was the same. The pond was the same. The ducks were the same, or at least their children were, paddling in slow circles near the reeds. Lily sat down, opened her sketchbook, and started drawing. Not circles, not shields pressed against her chest. She drew the water first, then the ducks, then the willow tree leaning over the bank. She drew a small girl sitting on a bench with a big sketchbook. She drew the sun. I sat beside her. The air was cool. The leaves on the willow were turning gold. Somewhere across the park, a father was pushing his daughter on a swing, and the chains creaked in a rhythm that sounded like breathing. "Mom," Lily said, not looking up from her page. "Yeah, baby. I'm glad it's just us." I put my hand on her shoulder. Her small frame was warm under my palm. She kept drawing, her pencil moving carefully, pressing just hard enough to make the colors bright. "Me too," I said. She looked up then. Her eyes were clear, the way they always were when she had decided something important. "You did the right thing, Mom." I didn't say anything for a moment. I just watched her. 8 years old, sitting on a park bench in Memphis, drawing ducks on a pond, no one bothering her, no one telling her she wasn't enough. That was the only legacy I gave her. Some doors close so better ones can open. I never regretted a single second of it. Setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's protection. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Loyalty earns its place. And family isn't a title you inherit. It's a relationship you maintain with respect. I chose strong boundaries, and it was the best decision I ever made. If you enjoyed this story about protecting your children and knowing your worth, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.